Yeah, the no blame approach is a special approach. It is a non-punitive bullying intervention, which in the very first moment seems to be absurd, but I'm going to explain you the rationale behind it. So now I'm going to the second slide. The no blame or NBA has been invented or constructed for juveniles, for children, in the beginning of the 90s in England. George Robinson, a headmaster, and Barbara Maines, a school psychologist, were looking for a constructive method to fight bullying in schools. Because previous experiences showed that different bullying intervention tools, including punishment of the offender, did not necessarily improve the situation for the bullied child, because it also carried the danger of revenge, which you can probably also understand or maybe have experienced yourself. So Barbara Maines and George Robinson designed a concept which did not focus on punishment, but rather on the change of group dynamics. Now, the question comes up, why are group dynamics important? So the rationale behind it, bullying is not just an interaction between the offender and the victim, but rather a situation where a whole group, a class or also a youth group is involved. The bullying activities are being watched by others. And in a lot of cases, it is the open or silent approval of the others which encourages a bully to continue. So he is in the center of attention and doesn't get any criticism. An intervention that leads to the withdrawal of support for the offender by the bystanders or the silent students can stop the bullying. So the idea is to not only work with a child that is the bully, the wrongdoer, but with a whole group that is somehow involved. So the NBA represents a systemic approach involving several members of a group or a class in a change process. It is future and resource oriented, doesn't look back, and doesn't analyze reasons for behavior pattern, which is also a very special idea. But in this case, there is also a reason behind it, so that the students who are bullying don't come up with any kind of justifications or explanations. So it tries to create a setting which enables looking for solutions. The attitude of a teacher is to initiate a change in behavior. The bully will not be confronted with his wrongdoing, no blame, this is where the name comes from, but he or she will be integrated into a group process to improve the situation for the victim and to stop bullying. Now I'm moving to the next slide. And here are the characteristics again in a nutshell. So first of all, it is important that it is a guideline for pedagogues, for adults who are working with groups and children of youth. As mentioned before, it's a systemic approach, meaning we look at the whole system, and system in this context means a group as an existing system. It focuses on solutions. It is carrying a future orientation, and it is focusing on future relationship, which in itself is understandable, because especially in a class, children are supposed to work together to cooperate somehow for a longer period of time. It works without blame and punishment in order to enable the change, and no reappraisal of the past means not looking back and looking for any kind of explanations. It focuses on communication and on group dynamics. It is based on the belief in the possibility to change to the better, meaning also children who are showing a really bad kind of behavior, that there is something inside that they can change to the better and is resource-oriented. And it offers a perspective also for the offender. And this is one of the deciding principles, because this is also one of the motives that offenders are changing behaviors. Now, I wanted to also point out the definition of bullying, because not every conflict, not every quarrel, not having different opinions is comparable with bullying. I don't know how it is in your country, but what I've heard in German schoolyards very often is that children start, or they use the accusation that somebody is bullying somebody else very fast. And it is important to differentiate when is it just a quarrel or when are we talking about bullying. So there are 6 characteristics for the so-called traditional bullying. It aims at systematically humiliating someone. So it's not only once, there's a system behind it, often well thought through. It includes every form of aggressive behavior, verbal, physical, material damage. We will later on talk about what it means when you talk about cyberbullying. It takes place repeatedly and over an extended period of time, meaning it's not once. It can go on for weeks or months. It is characterized by an extreme power imbalance. And as you can imagine, if an affected child has a feeling that a whole group is against it or that the others don't care, there is an extreme power imbalance. It's a group phenomenon because they are bystanders, they are colluders, there are people just watching it, maybe also because they're happy that they are not in the center of attention, and it leaves the affected student hardly a chance to escape the situation. Then we will move on to the definition of cyberbullying, which is getting really worse during the last years. So it means to intentionally insult, threaten, or show up someone via the internet or mobile services. It can be for a longer period of time or once, but with a heavy impact. And this is a certain a difference in comparison to the so-called conventional bullying. One picture in the internet is enough to really harm a student or a child, but we have to also look at other age groups. It also has heavy impacts on adults. It is, again, the imbalance of power between the bully and the victim. And when you look at the cyberbullying aspect, it's worse. And here, the victim can hardly defend himself or herself. Is the same. It's the same claim, but it's another dimension. So cyberbullying is actually worse than the so-called conventional bullying. So let's be clear about the definition, because sometimes the term bullying is used like inflationary. So we need to be very clear, when are we talking about bullying and when are we talking about quarreling. And what is also important, because some schools have so-called peer mediation programs where students help other students to solve a problem. A bullying case is not a case for peer mediation. It needs an adult. We heard in the introductory words, we already heard about terrible effects of cyberbullying. Generally, students reported in a survey that has been done by a German health insurance company and a foundation for several years, repeated studies. They talked about depressed mood, the drop in performance at school, The student misses classes, there are concentration problems, fears, anger, inner closure, headaches, other kinds of pain, and withdrawal in his or her own world. So also these effects already are heavy on the mental health of a student. So the question that also came up when we look at this phenomenon, why do students not defend themselves? And here again, students have been asked during surveys. So there are a couple of aspects that play a role here. So one aspect is they are afraid that things can get worse, because if an adult gets involved once but doesn't really solve the situation, then there might also be the effect of revenge. They are afraid that the adult help is not functioning, as I said before. They are also full of shame. Why does this happen to me? That's an aspect we also have to consider. Then, turning this around, victims are told that they deserve it. And bullies defend themselves by arguing that it's his or her own fault. So on the other hand, on one side, there is this inner attitude, maybe I deserve it. And this is, again, this is also coming from the side of the bullies. So this is a vicious circle. The victim is overwhelmed because the net never forgets and is constantly facing humiliating negative comments. As I said before, cyberbullying usually has a much harder effect on the individual than the so-called traditional bullying. Now, when we look at the so-called bullying system, we can recognize that there is an inner circle. So it's a closed system. There are the protagonists, the bullied child, the wrongdoers, the colluders, those who are supporting the bully, and the observers. And this slide just shows that the no blame is based on the idea that it needs an intervention from outside, but the intervention from outside is not only focusing on the two individuals, but on the whole system. So I will skip the first paragraph, which I already explained. So in this approach, bullying will not be regarded from the perspective of the offender and the victim, but rather from a systemic approach to change the dynamic between these different actors. This means that representatives of the class will be in the focus, including the bullies, not only the bully or bullies, but different representatives of a class, including colluders and observers, as well as the affected student, because bullying is a group phenomenon. And now I will start explaining the 3 steps of the process. Here you will see, or you see an overview. The first step, I will just briefly mention the steps, sorry, and then explain it more in detail afterwards. So the first step is the pedagogue talks to the bullied student or child. This means that he or she has to be either noticed it herself or himself, or it has been reported, maybe by the parents, maybe by other students, we don't know. We assume that the pedagogue knows about it and then has an individual talk with a bullied student in a safe place, in a closed room, not somewhere in the hallway in the school, but in a safe place. Then the second step would be the pedagogue forms a support group. And here we already come to one of the framings of a no blame. the group that will be formed is called a support group. Why support? I will explain this later to you. So, and this support group is including bullying protagonists and colluders, half of them, and the other half will be respected students or maybe even friends of a victim. So we have a mixed group, we have different representatives of a group. The goal of a support group is to develop ideas and measures to improve the situation of the affected student and to put the ideas and measures into practice. This will take a couple of like 2 weeks or something in order to realize this. Again, I will explain it more in detail in the next slides. Then the third step are so-called follow-up meetings. Obviously, the meetings are started with the affected student, with the victim, whether or not he or she is doing better, whether or not things have changed. And then there will be meetings with the participants of a support group, and these meetings will be individually, not with a group as a whole. So this is the overview, and now let's have a look at the details. So, as mentioned before, firstly, the teacher or pedagogue meets with the affected child in order to win his or her trust and his or her agreement to intervene. This meeting is crucial. The teacher should not only show concern about what is happening, but also show his or her commitment to help and the confidence that the problem can be solved. The child during this meeting will be informed about the planned steps. In order to form the support group, the teacher or pedagogue asks the names of friends and of classmates who are still supportive. On the other hand, he or she also asks who's bothering the affected student, so the offender, the bully, and the bystanders. And let me underline, this first meeting is very important. So what is important to consider is the adult, the teacher who is described here should be a person the student trusts. It should be somebody the student already knows, has a good relationship to. So the approach can also build on this kind of trust. The teacher and the pedagogue should convey a lot of confidence that the situation can be solved. So the goal of this meeting is not, and here again, you might be surprised to find out in detail what happened to the student. It's not about like listening to the whole story of suffering, but to give him, or it is also not about to give him or her advice concerning possible changes of behavior. This is something that we have sometimes observed in schools before, that there's a tendency also to give advice to the victim, what he or she should change. No, we accept the victim. It is also not about reflecting possible reasons why he or she is affected. This just leads into the wrong direction. Remember, from the beginning we said it's solution-oriented, and so the steps will not include a long reflection of the history, but it will focus on finding ways, finding or developing ideas how to improve the situation. So you see, the meeting is not that long. Here it says approximately 30 minutes, which is more or less reality. The child should be relieved of any responsibility. So it's not on the shoulders of the child. The teacher, pedagogue signals his or her commitment. A date for a follow-up meeting will be found within, well, here it says 8 to 14 days, I'd rather say 14 days. And until then, the child observes carefully what happens. So again, I want to underline, this is functioning when there is some kind of a trust basis between the teacher, the pedagogue, and the child. So the teacher will make sure I'm taking care of this. I don't accept what is going on with you, and I want to change it to the better. Then the next big step, and again here, it takes the competences of a teacher. It takes the competences of somebody who is in a good relationship to his students, her students, and knows them very well. So the teacher forms a so-called support group. This includes 3 to 4 bullying protagonists plus 3 to 4 friends of the affected child, or at least neutral students. Remember before, the teacher asked the affected student who are, or asked for the names of these different types of students. The group's unique factor is that it is not a support group for the affected child. Again, you might be surprised, but for the teacher and pedagogue who asks for help to solve the bullying problem. So when you conduct this, or when this meeting is conducted, the teacher explains that he or she noticed that there's a child in the class which has a lot of problems, and whatever has been observed, and he or she considers it to be her problem. So she or she asks for the support to solve her or his problem. So the support group aims at developing ideas and measures which can be carried out by members of a group to stop bullying activities. This meeting also takes place in a closed setting, in a safe place, not somewhere on the schoolyard or somewhere in the hallway. It needs concentration, it needs a full attention, and it needs a closed door. So the meeting with a support group will take place during regular classes, and you can probably imagine why this is the case, so that nobody complains that he or she has to do an extra hour. The students will be invited. The purpose of the meeting will not be mentioned, just the need for solving a problem together. And obviously, the teacher has to be in contact with the other teachers before, so that these students are allowed to leave class. So initially, the teacher expresses his or her deep concern about the fact that one of the students is being bullied, and clarifies that this is an unacceptable situation which needs to be changed. He or she shows an appreciative attitude towards all participants without blaming anybody. So again, imagine a situation, you have 8 students sitting there, you have the adult, the teacher who knows the children or the juveniles, and he or she is not working with an accusation, but is rather saying that there is a situation he or she can't accept, it needs to be changed, and the teacher needs the support of this group, especially this group, in order to improve the situation for the affected child. This is, in a way, paradox, I know it, and we can later on discuss it. Nevertheless, as I said, that this approach is working a lot with group dynamics, this is exactly the effect that it can have. When the teacher asks for support to change or improve the situation for the bullied child, and is asking for ideas how to support this child, to develop activities together, to take the student, to invite the student, play together, whatever, according to the age. Then a group dynamic develops where the children or the youth think about activities together with the bullied child. And when it comes to the wrongdoers, to the bully, it is enough that they declare, we will stop bullying. We won't repeat it. I think that I have already included some of this. So, as I said before, it is a closed setting, a group of students. The focus is ideas how to support the affected child. Then the teacher asks for ideas, whatever is age appropriate. They play together, they go out together, whatever. They provide the person with homework or support, assist with homework, spending time, inviting for birthdays, and the bully declares that he or she will stop the bullying. That's enough. That's sufficient. Then finally, obviously, the teacher thanks the students for their constructive ideas and support and finds a date for follow-up meetings. Now, let me add, obviously, the children who are sitting there know exactly what it is all about. Even if a teacher is not blaming anybody, the children obviously know the reason behind it. And obviously, this might also come up in a discussion. Again, the teacher will acknowledge this, will say yes, and this is why we're sitting here. And from now on, I want things to change. Let's focus on the future. Let's focus on a solution. You see the kind of attitude. Then, thirdly, follow-up meetings with the affected student, as already mentioned, and the members of a support group will take place 8 to 14 days later, rather 14 days. The teacher talks to the affected student in order to find out whether any positive changes occurred and how he or she is doing. Now, obviously, hearing whether these activities have also been practiced. If the answers are positive, the bullying has stopped and the classmates are friendly and supportive, the no-blame approach was successful. The teacher will thank the student for the trust and invite him or her to turn to him in case of difficulties. There will also be individual meeting with the group members to evaluate the situations. Have the students been able to put their ideas into practice? However, if the bullying continues, the teacher will announce a second meeting with a support group and assure the affected student that he or she will continue to take care of a problem. And honestly, if a second support group and the time afterwards is not changing the situation to the better for the affected child, then obviously the bullying won't be ignored. Then obviously other steps are taken. And this can, I assume that this might be similar. There can be a conference with the bully or several bullies. The parents can be invited. So all of these kind of measures can be taken. It won't be ignored. Finally, I wanted to share an idea which has been become quite popular here in Germany. It's called love storm. Since the effects of cyberbullying are so incredibly negative and awful, terrible, the idea came up that things can also be turned around. Instead of sending nasty comments, instead of sending horrible comments, you can also send positive comments as a positive intervention. So if there is a picture, whatever kind of attack, instead of repeating negative comments, you might also come up with a supportive sentence. So this idea is called love storm. And yeah, that's a little figure an emotional monster figure. I'm using a lot in my trainings with students, but also with adults. So showing a positive attitude, a grateful attitude, and also showing positive emotions. Okay. Thank you for your attention. I'm convinced that there will be lots of questions, because what you just heard was a brief overview. I'm convinced that you might have lots of questions, and I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you very much for the presentation and for introduction of a new point of view into such a difficult topic of bullying. When we speak about this approach, I have to say that I was quite surprised by this new and quite innovative way of solving this issue. And maybe the first question I would like to ask is, what is the most common victim of bullying? Could you characterize such a victim?
Well, actually, there is no typical victim. Bullying. What I can say is that bullying occurs mostly in the ages between the 5th and the 9th grade. So, but that's another answer. This is not what you were asking for. From what we have seen in our no blame courses, there is not a typical character or individual wearing the wrong clothes or whatever, maybe not having a good haircut, or these kind of things. From our experience, anybody can become a victim of bullying. It also depends whether or not the students might be in some kind of a crisis, or maybe not doing that well. So some students are there who really take things to their heart, and others can just ignore it. So the answer is quite, it's not that clear from our observations, depending on the psychological strength, also on the support in the class. A lot of students can become victims.
I can see that the questions are popping up, so I would like to cheer you up, ask questions. Before I move to questions, what should perhaps parents pay attention to, especially in regards to their child or student, or perhaps pedagogues when they may suspect that they have become a victim of bullying?
Yeah, I think that's a very important question. I mean, parents will notice when the child is in a sad mood, withdraws, or maybe also performance in school drops. All of these, parents are the first ones to notice it. So obviously parents should try to talk to their children, try to find out what is behind it. And often, well, as I said, sometimes children are hesitant to talk to the parents, but there are also other examples where when a parent asks about it, that they are able to express it. So it's very important to have an open ear, to be observant, and especially when performance in school drops, not only to put pressure on the child, but also ask whether something is in the background, whether something is bullying the child. When it comes to teachers, with teachers, obviously, they have to take care of a whole class. So it's not only one individual, but also teachers will notice differences. Teachers might notice when a child or a juvenile is often missing. I mean, and calling in sick, or when performance drops, or when other behavior patterns, like a child that was normally really in a good mood, might not is sad or not talking to the others. There's another indicator that sometimes bullied children try to stay very close. The younger ones try to stay very close to teachers in order to avoid the situations where they are alone during the break with the other youngsters. So there are a couple of indicators, and I think it has also a lot to do with a good relationship with the whole class, so that teachers are attentive and aware when something happens.
I can imagine that it may be a bit more difficult in a case of cyberbullying, right? When because it happens online, and it's not exactly it's not possible to moderate everything and to observe it completely. For me, it was interesting to read about a French case where after a suicide of 13 years old girl, they made more strict laws in a quite drastic manner compared to the former law. And currently, the perpetrator can receive a sentence of 10 years in prison and a fine of 100,000 euros in case when a child takes their own life. Are there cases of more strict laws after, let's say, more difficult case after, let's say, suicide? Do you happen to know of something like that? Let's say that a cyberbullying case has caused stricter laws. Do you remember such case?
When I talk about Germany, actually, our laws are not as strict as in France, but in France, this has just been a recent development because of an actual case only a couple of weeks ago. In Germany, schools are forced, when it comes to cyberbullying, they are even forced to talk to the authorities, to also include police. But the punishment itself, the sentence, is not as harsh as in France. And again, schools, when they, even if they have to talk to the police, when they say that they would like to work on it with a pedagogical approach in order to stop or to change the situation, this is well regarded. This is appreciated. Obviously, somebody who really, in a really bad case, I have not heard about a suicide here, but in a really bad case, the student will also face legal consequences, obviously, yeah. When it's too bad. And nevertheless, we try to work earlier. We try to start on a lower level.
My question to you about this would be this. Is it possible to prevent cyberbullying? To avoid it?
Well, this is what we are trying to do in our projects. We are trying to, as Maria mentioned, that I'm currently working in a German-Lebanese project. I've worked before in other international settings. And one of the main aspects was awareness raising. So to run workshops with the students in schools, but also with the adults, with the parents and with the teachers, because as we all know, the younger ones in most cases are much more competent than an older generation to deal in the whole field of social media and so forth. So awareness raising courses with juveniles, but also with parents and teachers have been very promising. And then out of these awareness raising courses, the students developed some kind of campaigns. Now we are bullying-free school. We speak out against cyberbullying. So there is a message behind it. I think that is a very important step to work already preventive and not only when it has happened.
Thank you very much. Now we have a question from Slido. So it's being filled up. And the first one with most votes is how to go about when you have older children where the teacher, where the bully does not want to change their ways, their behavior.
Well, I can talk from my own experience that when you establish dynamics like what I have described, you have this group meeting, you have the teacher there. I mean, you also have to imagine it. You're in a separate room, maybe a separate classroom. You have a teacher there, you have 4 children who are either bullies or who are watching it and who think it's funny. And then on the other hand side, you have 4 supportive students or friends or at least neutral students. And this group dynamic, this talk already puts a lot of pressure, even if the teacher avoids the blame. The teacher is not saying, I know that you did it, and I think that this is a horrible action and so forth and so forth. But the teacher just focuses on the well-being of the victim. But the situation, as you can imagine, puts a lot of inner pressure on a bully. And what we also notice is, because now let's say the bully himself or herself is not willing to change behavior, but the bystanders are changing behavior. He is not in the center of attention anymore. He is not the big guy anymore. The others are signalizing him that it is a terrible behavior pattern, that it's not cool anymore. And these kind of group dynamics are adding to a behavior change. But obviously, it's never 100% sure. The survey, a survey has shown with 196 schools in Germany that the approach has been successful in 90%. Still 10% left, yeah.
I have to say that when I heard about those statistics, I was impressed that this is such an effective tool. Another question to you about this approach is this approach without blame. This was in a case of a, let's say, class. It was a direct bullying. The question is, does the same method, can this method be applied even in the case of cyberbullying? And if so, what steps could be used, or what steps are there to be taken for change?
Well, when it comes to cyberbullying, there need to be additional steps. I mean, in most cases, the schools have someone and some kind of an IT expert. This person needs to be informed, and then it needs. They are going to find out the IP address and this, this kind of technical stuff, and they're going to stop, to interrupt, to make sure that the cyberbullying itself is stopped. Now, I'm not the person, I'm not the expert when it comes to this. I'm always referring to colleagues. But obviously, in case of cyberbullying, these technical aspects have to be considered. Nevertheless, the process itself is the same, because cyberbullying is also effective because people are watching it or making their science, trying to support it. And the no blame is based on the idea that if the bystanders, if a group withdraws the support, that the bully himself is not in the center anymore, does not get what he wants with the bullying. The sympathy is supposed to shift to the victim, away from a bully to the victim. So maybe at some point, and this is also true when it comes to cyberbullying, if the effect that the clicks and clicks and clicks are not there anymore, then it might change. And the last aspect that I mentioned, which I find it's a great idea, the so-called love storm. In case of negative pictures or whatever, comments, lies, rumors, whatever is in the net, just turn it around and send a positive message.
I would like to get back to one question which has received the biggest amount of likes. You have hinted already the way how should the bully understand that they are the aggressor and to accept that they will not do it anymore without labeling him as aggressor. So as per your approach, without blaming, so you said that this is based on group dynamic. Could you please elaborate on this?
Yeah, as I said before, the teacher is not blaming, but when the children are sitting in this room and the teacher is talking about the observation that the one student, let's say the name Peter, let's say Peter is not doing well, missing class, changed behavior patterns completely, the students understand what it is all about. It's an indirect hint that the situation for this child, let's say the name is Peter, is so awful that it needs to be changed. And they are responsible for doing this. And in this moment, often the children amongst themselves are accusing each other. So the no blame means the adult is not blaming. The children might also be honest in that situation and then refer to the bully and say, okay, you know exactly why this is the case. Why do you do this? So we all, the people who are present, all know who is the one who is responsible, who are the bystanders, and who are observers who just don't have the courage or whatever. So you know that children also have a very fine sense for justice, and the teacher allows a setting where they can refer to this. And then the next step would be, okay, we want to get away from this. We know that it is a very bad behavior. We know that things have to be changed. But I trust you that you can improve it to be better. And then there's a step that I have not explained in depth. The teacher will, before he or she goes into this situation, will think about a positive aspect every student has, even the bully. And if you have had your class or for a longer period of time, even bullies have shown positive behavior at some point. So you're referring to the positive behavior. Maybe he or she helped carry something or helped a weaker student with homework and whatever. What is important is you have to be you have to think about this beforehand so that you can address even the wrongdoers and tell them, I remember a time when you did something wonderful and you did this and this. It has a lot to do with psychology. And then, as I said, the no blame is referring to the adults. The children amongst each other might be very open. The teacher will allow it for a certain period of time. Otherwise, it might be destructive. But then we'll focus on the future and say, okay, we know what's on the table and let's move forward. What can you do?
Thank you. Bullying can be very sensitive for the reputation of schools. And the question would be whether you have ever encountered that adults or maybe teachers at schools kind of didn't want to other like surrounding schools or society to see that at their school the bullying takes place.
Yeah, unfortunately, yes. You're fully right. Yeah, every school is looking at the reputation. Every school, obviously. Yeah, and we had a discussion here, and I also know that the discussion is like in the international context where I'm sometimes active. It takes a little bit of courage in order to be honest about this, but the anti-bullying program, now when I talk about constructive conflict transformation in schools, the anti-bullying program is only one step. There are other steps. And what the schools, what they find acceptable is like when you're looking at a whole approach, a holistic approach with different programs. Now there could be the peer mediation, there could be awareness raising, there could be also including sessions for parents to include them. There could be other preventive measures in terms of violence prevention. When you start it from this angle, there is less of resistance, because then you will start it at a point where the schools might not even have these kind of problems, but it would be preventive. And then you can include these kind of measures. I know of a school in Bonn. I'm living here in Bonn, which has a very good reputation. And nevertheless, some teachers came across, then they invited me and they invited colleagues, and we introduced a whole set. So they would form a mediation club where the children are practicing mediation. They're first of all learning mediation, then they're also practicing mediation. Then there are all kinds of preventive activities, violence prevention in the widest sense, and then also the no blame approach. So it's one step out of several steps, and then sometimes it's easier, but I know exactly why you ask.
Yes, this non-blame approach here in Slovakia, it's quite unknown, and the question is whether you could recommend any literature, maybe if people want to get more educated on this topic, any maybe available literature on this topic.
Yeah, it should be on the last slide of my presentation. There should be, and if I have not edited, obviously the original literature from these British authors is available in English. Then we have the books, the books in German. I'm not sure whether you have translated. I'm just trying to think in which languages the program will be translated, in which I also worked within the EPIC context. The EPIC context is a certain project within Europe, and the Slovakian colleagues are involved, but I'm not sure whether or not this is also translated in Slovak. Maybe somebody else will know. But the main literature is in German and English, I have to say, yes. The big books.
During your presentation, you said that the victim of bullying can be anybody, and the question is whether that fits for the aggressor, for the bully as well, whether anybody who can become a bully. Does the same thing, apply to bullies?
Well, the interesting thing is that bullies have often been victims before. This is an observation, or this is not an observation, it's a finding. I read in this survey, which I mentioned before, from the German health insurance, in a lot of cases, we're just turning it around. Whether anybody, I don't think I'm able to answer it. I think it needs a level of anger or frustration. It needs a certain mindset. Whether this is true for anybody, I don't know.
Maybe it's an anger that hasn't been solved in the past, and a person that needs to ventilate it, maybe in this way, possibly.
Or a possibility that opens up all of a sudden, yeah.
If we move on to the area of bullying and the workplace, there is a question: what is the most common cause of bullying at a workplace? So for adults.
Well, I have to say that I'm not an expert there. So I find it, no, I can't answer this without, my focus is school, is children. What I can say is that there has been a time when this model, this concept, has also been applied in working contexts with adults. There it's a little bit more complicated, but my experiences are from schools, so this is not what I would like to mention. I don't know whether anybody asks about parents, the role of parents in your overview. Is there a question about the role of parents? Besides observing their children?
Yes. Maybe what to do if we cannot find out who is bullying our child, and we are worried that our child might be bullied, but we are not sure. What should we do? What should we do in such a case?
I would try to talk to trusted teachers. I know that sometimes parents don't trust every teacher, but maybe there are some special persons they trust a lot who is in contact with a child. Also, I would talk to friends of a child. I would try to find out by people who are close, but then obviously the most important thing is to somehow have access to your own child. I mean, somehow build a bridge or create a setting where the child might open up by assuring that the child would have a full support, that you would be understanding, that you're just full of worries. I mean, usually children react to this kind of approach and don't close up completely when a child notices it. I mean, especially when parents are expressing this. I wanted to mention something else in the context of parents. This is a different aspect. Sometimes parents question the no blame approach. And you can probably imagine why they question it, because for them, for their sense of justice, the no blame approach is not functioning. I said before, it is without punishment. The wrongdoer only has to stop the behavior, and then it's forgiven. So for some parents, this is a very difficult idea, because obviously when you see that your child is suffering a lot, obviously you also think that the person who caused this has to be punished, have some kind of consequences. So this is a discussion we had a lot, and sometimes or often what it came down to was the key question: what do you think is the best for your child? Now, what is your motivation? Like, your sense of justice will not be satisfied. But if your child is doing better, would you be willing to accept this? And especially when we're talking about children now, I said the ages 5th to 8th, 9th class, when we have a lot of mobbing cases, especially in this time. I mean, they are still in their development. So we had lots of discussions concerning the justice, the fairness problem.
I'll get back to parents. So if they know that the child, there is a lot of signs on their child that he or she might be bullied, maybe the first thing they can do is to turn to either a homeroom teacher or the management of the school. So is this the first step they should take, parents?
Well, I mean, in case the bullying happens in the context of a class, and this was my assumption. I mean, this concept was developed for the school, or in case of group dynamics within a youth group, within a church or whatever, where you have a closed circle. Then obviously I would turn to the school, and schools normally have a set of measures how they handle bullying cases. Now, the no blame approach is one method. There are other methods, but normally schools have different strategies how to deal with it. Yeah. What I would not do is, and this is something where things can get worse, when you as a parent start meeting the parent of the other child. So the problem jumps to the level of adult, parents fighting parents. So this is what we have seen before. This is not fruitful, because often parents are very quite intense. So it is better to look for the help of the school teachers that are trusted, or in case of other groups, then maybe the youth leader, somebody with an age difference.
Can we actually prevent bullying in a classroom? It's a very spread form of bullying. As we said, children are often ventilating their own injuries or anger or emotions that have not been dealt with in the past. What activities, what methods do you use in Germany so that there are healthy relationships created in the classroom as a prevention?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, in Germany is well. I mean, I've worked with a couple of schools, and as I said, we use this so-called holistic approach. So there are programs starting often in the fifth school, sometimes also in primary school, social learning activities, and these activities often have a target to improve cooperation, to improve empathy for each other, to be able to solve a problem or conflict, not physically, but with words. So to avoid any kind of physical violence. So there are a couple of different activities which you can already apply in the classes. I know from lots of schools here, here we have a change of schools from the fourth. The primary school goes until the fourth, and the fifth class is in a different school. So it's either the gymnasium or it's another type of school. And here, a lot of class teachers take 1 hour a week in order to practice these kind of social learning activities. You saw this little drawing that I included, the monster card, the emotional monster card. Now that would be, for instance, one of the little methods. So this is one card out of a set of 25, and these little figures, they are called monsters, sweet monsters, show different emotions on in their face and in their whole appearance. And so working with these emotional cards, for instance, means that a child doesn't have to say, I feel this and this and this, but can show a card and say, oh, this is how I feel today. So there are different tools, methods, lots of activities when it comes to social learning. That's one aspect, and I know schools are starting to practice this in the 5th grade. Then what I said is these awareness raising workshops where you show videos. They are very well done videos, and one of it has been translated to Slovak, and Maria has the link to it and can share it later with you. So what I did is, obviously, I didn't use the Slovak translation. I used the German translation. What we did is we showed the film, which is showing or portraying a scenario of cyberbullying a while ago. This is why it looks very old-fashioned. When you look at the phones they have, they don't have iPhones. But anyway, the purpose of this video is very clear. So you can introduce a film. What we did is we stop it at some point and we ask the students in class, what would you do in the role of the bullied child, of a wrongdoer, of the mother, of the teacher? And this is only one example. There is a set of other activities where you can think about sensitizing students for this. Stories where they try to develop ideas, stories about situations where juveniles are in a situation like this, and the students think about a way out. There are a lot of different activities that can be applied even within the lessons. So I know of teachers who would use a story like that in the lesson for German, for language, because it's a story. And then afterwards, the children are developing their own ideas and are writing. So you can even justify to use it during an ordinary lesson. As I said, there's a set of activities there, especially developed for schools. Maybe with a little bit of research.
As far as we know, the bullying doesn't have to happen only in one class. In terms of one class, as you have mentioned, there's a case related to the whole school in general. So the question would be, what would happen if the bullying happens across so not only inside the room? Let's say there's a child that is bullied by pupils, students from other classes. What should we do then?
Cooperate with the other class teacher and find and create mixed groups. Obviously, it depends here. It would really take a discussion who are the key people, because obviously you can't, the support group shouldn't be more than eight students in order to really have the group dynamics work. But you can work across classes, and in case of a widespread bullying phenomena, I would concentrate on finding key persons, identify key persons. Maybe there you also have to ask other students, like, who are the minds behind it, or who are those who are really pulling it or pushing it all the time. But theoretically, cooperating with other teachers and doing this support group activity with two teachers is possible. I mean, not only theoretically, I know of teachers who do it with two of them, also to have a better overview. Or I've heard cases where a school social worker was involved. That sometimes makes also sense, because the social workers have a different role. They are not responsible for the marks and the grading. So sometimes these people also have a lot of trust, good relationships to the students.
You have mentioned that sometimes parents may be a bit careful when they hear about the approach of yours, non-blame approach. Is it, they ask, is it effective? Is the bullying going to stop? Is their child going to be protected? So the question is, do you then work with the aggressor, that is the source of the bullying, so they would stop and they would not go and do bad things to other children?
After the procedure of a no-blame approach? Yes.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah. I have not said that before, obviously. This is also part of the activities. Sometimes it's not enough to conduct the 3 steps. Sometimes, first of all, you have to have a close look at the victim child, whether or not he or she needs more support, maybe some kind of also counseling or whatever. But on the other hand side, you should also have a look at the person who bullied. And it's depending, obviously, on how how bad it was. And it is also depending maybe whether or not this is repetitive. So you can also think about a special kind of program for the bully. Yes.
In Austria, there is so-called, together with the teacher, there is helpers. We have in Slovakia, we have pedagogue assistants, and they have the time to work with the group dynamic in a class. So how does it work in Germany? Do you have similar pedagogical assistants, those who work alongside the teacher?
You mean within a classroom? Mm. Yeah. Yeah, this has been, yeah, well, I will answer it on two, or I will mention two aspects. What is very common nowadays is that we have so-called school social workers. We have trained social workers who are only working with one school, and so they do any kinds of programs with the children. They offer activities after school. They are there during the break to listen to problems or for any kind of support. So this is one aspect. And then there is another aspect. Since there has been a strong move that we have so-called integrated schools, different types of students are mixed in a class. We don't separate anymore between children who are handicapped. So handicapped children are nowadays also attending normal schools. And they get an assistant. But this is also the case for a student that might have difficulties. So, sometimes there are children with a difficult background, with other kinds of problems within the family, with a high level of aggression, all of this. And also these type of students might have an assistant, yeah. This is not everywhere the case, but in some schools, yeah.
As we know, for students to feel good in a school, it's also crucial to have adequate environment for that. And quite often teachers, this is quite commonplace in Slovakia, but also in other countries, they are overwhelmed with the bureaucracy. They have to stay in school and do more hours. So the question would be, what measures are being taken to ensure that teachers would not be overwhelmed with the paperwork and of course meeting results and goals in the school, but so they would have the time to take care of how the students are doing, to build their relationships, and then by this to prevent possible cases of bullying.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. I mean, here we also hear the complaints that it's getting more difficult and there are not enough teachers. I know. This seems to be a Europe-wide phenomena. But what I can say is, and this is something I think is really good, teachers who are involved in these kind of activities, like, for instance, building up a mediation club or taking care of these pedagogical approaches to deal with bullying. These teachers have to teach, let's say, sometimes 1 hour less. So this is considered to be their working time. And that was a big step forward. I mean, in the beginning, it was not the case. And at some point, the teacher said, we are putting all this energy into it. And we are building up these clubs, these mediation clubs. And we are training our students. Now, after I have trained the students, I leave the material there, the didactic material, so they can continue and then educate the next years to come. And at some point, it was rewarded by we have a federal system, so it can be true in North Rhine-Westphalia. It doesn't have to be true in Bavaria. So it differs there. But for North Rhine-Westphalia, I know that students get an extra hour. In other words, they have to teach an hour less when they're showing these kind of activities. But otherwise, obviously, I know that, I mean, there are lots of complaints how much work has to be done. Yeah. Maybe something. No, I can also mention something else here. External volunteers are sometimes joining these kind of activities. So we have even a concept, senior citizens for retired, I mean seniors, retired people who are helping in these kind of social activities in schools, which is a really interesting observation, because the senior citizens who are retired are theoretically the grandparents and the age group of grandparents of students. Interesting enough, they get a lot of respect. So this is also one of the observations that we've made, is that volunteers from outside sometimes contribute or help. But otherwise, generally, teachers have to work very hard nowadays, I know.
Yeah, I also hear it from my surroundings, from my close friends. And by this, we have fulfilled our time. I would like to thank you very much, Beate, that you have introduced us into this insanely complicated but also really important topic, and that you have brought us this new light of non-directive and the non-blaming approach to bullying. Thank you very much, Beate.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for your curiosity.
And at the end, I would like to thank all of you for your attention. And tomorrow, I'll present you with a short report from this webinar where you'll have recordings. So in case you'd like to listen to this or hear a question one more time, or you have missed something, so you'll have the chance to listen to it one more time. If you have liked this webinar, please subscribe to our channel and also subscribe to our newsletter. I would like to also thank our interpreters. They did a great job. Without them, it would not be possible to do this webinar in 2 languages. So thank you very much. And before we finally part, I would like to bring your attention to our new book exhibit, because your life is your chance, which brings a new point of view on the question of life. And the book says that each of us has a unique and special calling and task that awaits for us in the world. And it gives us a list of things how to properly live your life and how to live to the maximum level. So this is definitely a good present for your close ones for Christmas. So please do not hesitate and check it up on our website. Thank you very much again, and I wish you a nice evening.
Bye-bye.